Hello, welcome. We're here at the Business Startup Show on the Great British Business Show, and I'm here with a man from Saatchi and Saatchi Advertising Agency. It's Andrzej Moyseowicz. Yes?
Excellent
Can you
pronunciation.
believe that? Can you believe this was first take? Unbelievable. How are you doing, Andrzej?
I'm doing really well, thank you.
Good stuff. And what are you doing here?
Well, it's a key 2-day conference here. Great British Business Show. Tons of enthusiastic people. 30,000 people signed up, and you can feel the energy here.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a huge prism of optimism, which we need in economic times like this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it does say a lot about our kind of resilience as a nation, I think.
Yeah, fighters, man. Don't sit back. Go for it.
I can't help but notice your American accent and your Polish name.
That is correct. My parents were immigrants to the States, but they raised me in that great hybrid household. European values, American accents, and a lover of the underdog. Rocky films to startup businesses is where I like to be.
Oh, brilliant. So that's why you're involved in startups.
Exactly.
They're all underdogs at the moment, fighting each other.
It's good for good reasons, too.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're over here in England and you work for Saatchi & Saatchi. Everybody knows who they are. If you aren't, then Google it or something, because we won't waste time talking about it. But what do you do at Saatchi?
So I'm the Media Innovation Director. It's a hybrid creative strategy role.
Yeah.
Main thing that comes out of it is how do you tell compelling stories in a lot of different ways, whether it's digital, analog, social media, it doesn't really matter. It's about bringing great brands and brand stories to life.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, and you've got this thing at Saatchi & Saatchi, loving your brand or brand.
Yes,
brand
that's right. Love marks.
Love marks. That was it.
Yeah, it's about catalyzing loyalty beyond reason. So the line I always say, and it's great to say to a CEO who's not used to emotions being in the boardroom, is you say, look, do you want to be liked or loved? And it's quite a simple answer, right?
Yeah.
We want to be loved, and that's a combination of being respected and cared for and loved by people.
Do you think you can apply that to startups then? Do you think they can have that level of almost brand aspiration? Because as a small company, their brand might be not in a fully evolved state. Do you think that still applies?
I think it applies because the brand may be nascent, but normally the purpose isn't nascent. It's actually quite well evolved. And what I mean by that is the purpose, why you waking up early? Why are you staying late? How do those weekends manage? How you beg, borrow, steal the energy of others when you're trying to make an idea come to life? And that's what you feel here, and you feel amongst the entrepreneurs and the startup. It's actually even more important to understand what your purpose is, because normally your purpose is what evolves to be your brand.
Absolutely. And so you're here talking about how a small brand can act like a big brand.
Yeah,
essentially.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Talk us through it then, because you had a seminar on it earlier on. Can you break it down briefly for
Sure.
people watching this?
I mean, the key thing is it's kind of fun because you start off with going, you should act like a big brand, and it's almost actually act like big brands should sometimes, because not all big brands do. And the main thing about it is it's about creating legitimate intimacy with people, not consumers. You have to care what people care about, and small startups actually have a better chance to do that, whether it's in a B2B or B2C. It doesn't matter if it's a client, a partner, or a supplier. If they are permanently infatuated with you, the likelihood that you want to succeed together will happen. And so what the goal of the seminar here today was essentially, how do you take what wakes you up in the morning, what makes this worthwhile, and tell that story in a really portable way, so it moves across touch points, in a real potent way, so it cuts through and it's competitive. And the last bit is personal. It's personal to you, it's personal to customers. They can own a part of that story.
Yeah. I suppose part of that is also applicable to turning the initial parts of a startup, turning your passion into a business. And that applies, I suppose, throughout your brand, which is at the forefront of everything you do.
It has to be. I mean, 15, 20 years ago, when you could pay for people's attention, you could pay for those eyeballs on a TV advert, it was a different game. It just, all that mattered was how big your media spend was. Now it's about catalyzing through creativity, loyalty beyond reason, and that is from stories that happen within Facebook and Twitter as much as that big TV, big brand work. Yeah. It's a dynamic between those two, and that is a rich space that anyone in this conference center can do. They can get open on Facebook, they can be social there, they can be professional on LinkedIn, and they can share what they care about right now on Twitter, and that's free. It's your effort, your purpose, your time.
Exactly. And how do you see that dynamic going forward then? This idea of social media, almost rivalry with traditional media buying in terms of television and radio. How's that dynamic moving forward? How's that relationship moving forward? Can they coexist, or can one outmuscle the other?
I think the challenge for most brands and most agencies is that they try to make it coexist. It's almost like when you're at the zoo and you got the lions right next to the antelope. Yeah, there's a fence there. They're coexisting. It's not really a partnership, right? And for me, the dynamic has to be actually a collaborative. It's got to be complementary, because often you have these big ideas that can be conveyed through the power of film, through TV, through imagery, and they have to then be represented in the way we share online with our online selves. And so I see this all complementary. You have to either play or get played. I love the fact that 20% of the conversation starts with a brand, but 80% of it's carried on by the people you touch.
Interesting. And so do you see that, I mean, not going too far removed and psychological about things, but of course the convergence between sort of traditional media platforms like TV and the internet, they're ever growing closer, aren't they? We're essentially going to have a phone soon that will pretty much do everything, and every advertising will be at the click of a button. So it's quite interesting. So you must see a lot of, I mean, I don't know at Saatchi whether you see lots of SMEs working with you. Presumably you're quite blue chip.
Well, we are, but we also, a lot of our clientele is big, the Toyotas, the T-Mobiles of the world. We also do smaller clients, sometimes on project basis, and this has been quite exploratory for us. Also, obviously, in our pro bono work, obviously we're working with, I would say, the budgets of SMEs. And I'm seeing that there is going to be a role and a place for, it may not be relationships that are retained, but they could be project relationships where it's sensible to learn from both the failings and successes of the big brands and be at the nascent moment in the beginning. I want to be part of the product and idea development of startups that'll be the next Googles of the world, the next Twitters. And we're starting to see more and more of that. We're starting to see a lot of our creativity applied to product design and innovating around the business model. And for me, that has to be the future. It can't just be about ads. We've got to be more than that.
So you say there has to be more than that, and that applies to brands going forward, because there are so many businesses around, and because there are 90% of the country's made up of SMEs. How does an SME go about setting its brand apart from everybody else?
I think the simplest way, it's simple when you say it but hard to do in practice, is that if you're an SME, if you're a startup, the first thing you know and you can feel, definitely if you're a CEO or an MD of a place, is you feel the weight of your employees on your shoulders. You care for them. There's normally a vested interest. And the tricky bit is you're time poor. And the hardest gift to give yourself, and it's something that I recommended here today, is that the quicker you identify your purpose and your set of beliefs and the things, more importantly, that you won't do rather than do in terms of your business and the story that business tells, the better. It clarifies what you need to do, and it helps you cut through the noise of the big media budgets of the bigger brands. Once you know what that purpose is, the idea is to care about what people care about. I had 2 people come up to me afterwards with very specific questions. One was on a carpet cleaning business. The other was a man writing a book about a character he invented. And there was a whole spectrum of other questions, but I was fascinated by the carpet cleaning because he apologized for saying, I had the most boring business in the world to talk to you about. And he said, carpet cleaning. I go, it's not boring. How's that possibly boring? What's the story behind those dirty carpets? What's the humor? At what point do you go, I have to call? The insights are there to cut through. If your wife is running this business, she's going to know the fun, the release that happens. That's the story to tell on YouTube. That's what you put in the Google reviews on the maps. And when someone looks up for carpet cleaning within 3 miles of your wife's business, they'll find those stories.
Wow, that's really interesting insight of how an agency might work, such as yours. So, to end on, do you think, and it's a speculative question, but do you think with your knowledge of brands and how brands operate within a marketplace globally and nationally, do you think you could be successful in building a company? What do you reckon, you personally? Do you think you could go out tomorrow and start a business?
Without a doubt. And the reason being is you have to have that confidence, I think, to be creative. The thing that can never die is you have to be entrepreneurial, and what I mean by that is just restlessly ambitious.
But is there an issue with people? I know creativity, you're at the heart of it, Saatchi, and generally companies with big money can afford to be creative, such as Cadbury with the Guerrilla campaign and that sort of sense of brand awareness. Lots of small companies won't have money to throw away and money to be kind of experimenting, if you like, with creative solutions. How do you respond to that?
Well, I in my previous life, I was an R&D engineer. I was a chemical engineer before being creative. And the thing I learned from that experience is that it's so important that the idea sits at the center of a table instead of your own ego. And that's hard to find. It's hard to find in creative agencies and big brands. Small startups, SMEs, that's how they have to work. They have to evolve almost in a Darwinian way. And that forces a type of creativity that I think is incredibly valuable. It's also what will make this country more innovative, and definitely in tougher times. And I sit there in that moment, the thing that you must know is know thyself, know what your purpose is, and how does that purpose touch people's lives. It's not about consumers, it's about target audiences. How does one person benefit from what you're doing? I don't care if it's B2B, B2C. If you capture that, that's what can be loved, and that's what can grow.
That is one great tip to end on. So thank you very much for joining us, Andrzej.
A pleasure.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Mark.
Cheers.